Hey, it's Vicky, and today I'm here to talk about the books that I read in February. It was a pretty okay month. Most of the books I read were either 3 or 4 stars. I have yet to have a 5-star read in 2023, so here's hoping that March will bring me that. But yeah, as for February, like I said, it was good. I read 7 things, 4 physical books, 2 audiobooks, and 1 ebook. And yeah, let's dive in. The first book that I completed in February was one I had started in January and just didn't quite finish. So I finished it up in February, and that book was Go Tell It on the Mountain by James Baldwin. And this is a classic set in the 1930s in New York, and it centers around a boy named John you are following him on his 14th birthday. And it's just kind of a day in the life sort of story where you follow him around for the day and you see what his life is like, what his family dynamic is like, and it's kind of a coming of age book, but sort of a unique one, I would say. And overall, I really liked this. I think that the writing was really strong. The thing I liked the most, though, was that, like I said, this was a coming of age story, but what made it sort of different was that there's a whole section in the middle of the book where it sort of goes back and gives you the backstory on the main kind of adults in John's family. So his father, his mother, and his aunt. You sort of each get kind of a chapter where it takes you back in time to kind of show you what their life was like before, kids came into the picture or anything like that. And I thought that was really interesting because a lot of times I think when you read books where a child is reflecting or talking about a parental relationship, the things that you learn about that parent are through the eyes of that child, either through the actions between them, on the page, or with the child telling you a story or something about their parent or parental figure. And in this one, it actually was an entire story that went in the past and was told through a narrator, not through our character. And it was just really interesting to see it that way. And I think this was in that sense, it was a good book about the whole idea that your parents sort of live this whole life before you even come into existence, and that a lot of that life, that experience, affects the way that they're going to parent you. And because honestly, John's father, or I should say stepfather, is not a likable person. He is very flawed. And even when you go back in time and you see his backstory, you still don't like him. At least I didn't. But you have somewhat of an understanding of who he is as a person. And so for that, it was really good. Those were my favorite parts of the book, was that kind of flashing back and seeing those backstories was really good. And then, like I said, the writing in here just overall was really strong. There was a lot of religious talk in here that I have to say sort of went over my head, but it didn't make me dislike the book or anything. And I think I would definitely read more James Baldwin. I've heard Giovanni's Room is really good, so maybe that'll be my next one, I'm not sure. But yeah, I really enjoyed this. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Next up, I read a memoir. Well, I listened to a memoir on audio, and it was narrated by the author. That was Born a Crime by Trevor Noah. And this one, I was really interested in reading because I am a fan of Trevor Noah's work. I think he is a very funny man, and I really enjoyed him on The Daily Show. And so I was interested in hearing sort of what it was like for him growing up, because he grew up, he's about my age, and he grew up in South Africa during apartheid. And so that's a memoir sort of story that I've never read a memoir from that perspective before. And so it was really interesting, some of the stuff that, that Trevor Noah lived through and what it was like to grow up biracial in a country situation like apartheid. And yeah, there were times where it was really funny, of course. Trevor Noah is a comedian, so yeah, there were definitely parts that were funny. Then there were parts that were pretty sad, pretty deep, pretty emotional. And I just think that, yeah, he told his story very well. And I enjoyed it very much. So I would definitely recommend the audiobook for this if you're interested, because like I said, he narrates it, and he did a really great job. So this was probably my favorite read of the month, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Then I had a DNF in February. I DNF'd Bonk by Mary Roach, and you might know this already if you saw my reading vlog that I put up this month, where I DNF'd this book during that vlog. And basically I DNF'd it because it just wasn't holding my interest, basically. And you know, if a book isn't holding your interest, you shouldn't keep reading it, honestly. And this one was about like the science of sex and sort of the ways that scientists do, you know, kind of study sex from a physiological perspective and stuff. And I thought it would be really interesting, but it wasn't. And so I DNF'd it. Then speaking of that reading vlog, I finished a book during that vlog so I'm probably not going to talk too much about this because I feel like I already reviewed it in that vlog. So I will make sure to link that vlog so you can get my more deep thoughts. But I finished Instructions for Dancing by Nicola Yoon during that vlog. And this one is a YA romance, which, as you guys know, is one I don't normally, a genre I don't normally go for. But this one really, I wanted to read it because of the dancing aspect, because I love books about dance of any kind. And so this one is about a young girl, I think her name was Evie, yes, who starts to take ballroom dancing lessons and gets partnered with this boy, and they fall in love. And so what was cool about this book was just the whole kind of theme about love and not being afraid to fall in love or to start a romance because of worrying about outcomes. And I think that can kind of be true with anything in life. Like if you start thinking too much about outcomes and what could happen, you're like never gonna do anything. And but this one specifically was more about love and relationships, and it was just a really strong emotional read. I really liked it. The only reason I docked it half a star was because I wish it had had more dancing in it. The dancing definitely took a back seat for quite a while in this book, and I wish it had been more constant throughout. So I gave this 3.5 stars though. I really enjoyed it, and I think if you like YA romance or dance books, you should check it out. Next, I read a book that I purposely wanted to read at this time of year because it centers around Valentine's Day, and it's one I read as a kid, and I actually started reading it during that reading vlog, but I didn't quite finish it. But that was Broken Hearts by R.L. Stine. And this is one of the first Fear Street books that I read as a kid, and so when I had an opportunity to get a copy, I picked it up because I was like, I definitely want to reread it because I really remember just loving this book and just devouring it. But I didn't remember anything about it other than that it was set at Valentine's Day. And I have to say, for a Fear Street book, this was pretty good. Like, I would say this is one of the good ones for sure. And I think it's because in this one, it just seemed like the characters were more like fleshed out. There was more to them. And when you kind of find out the why of it all, like who, because basically the story is that this girl, Josie, is starts getting these letters around Valentine's Day, these Valentines around Valentine's Day, basically like from someone saying that they're going to kill her. And so it's like a, you know, murder mystery, I guess, sort of thing, like who's trying to kill this girl and why. And when you kind of find out why, it actually all made sense. And the way that he sort of structured it all was like the motives and stuff were very clear, and it wasn't just like dropped in at the end where you're like, oh, okay. Like, to me, it just seemed like it was actually really well thought out. And the characters, the motivations, and just the way that it all kind of worked out in the end, I thought was pretty solid. So I would definitely say if you are a Fear Street fan and you want to read this, you know, save it for Valentine's Day, because it is definitely a fun one to read around Valentine's Day. Yeah, I mean, of course, it does get kind of dark. I mean, we are talking about murder and teenagers and stuff here, but it was really fun. It really was. And so I gave this one 3.5 stars. Then the kids and I finished a book that we had started to read in January. I was reading it aloud to them, and we finished it up in February, and that is Charlie and the Chocolate Factory by Roald Dahl. And this is a Roald Dahl book that I never read as a kid. So when the kids asked if I could read it aloud to them, I said yes, because I'm like, yeah, you know what? I've never read that one either. Even though I know the story of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory because I have seen the movie Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory many, many times. But for those of you that don't know what Charlie and the Chocolate Factory is about, it's about a little boy named Charlie Bucket who he lives in a city where he and his family are very poor. But within the city, there is this humongous chocolate factory that is run by this man named Willy Wonka. And one day Willy Wonka, he's very mysterious, like nobody ever sees him out and about. There's all this like mystery surrounding the factory and Willy Wonka himself. But one day he kind of puts out there that he's having this sort of contest where he's putting within his chocolate bars 5 golden tickets all over the world. And the 5 children that find these golden tickets get to come to his factory and tour the factory. Like I said, the factory is normally like locked down. Nobody gets in, nobody goes out. There's a whole like mystery surrounding it. So this is very exciting. And Charlie gets one of those golden tickets and gets to go to the factory. So this book was a lot of fun. The kids loved this book. I liked it as a parent because I think underlying themes were interesting, like things like, don't be a brat, don't be greedy, read a book instead of watching TV, just things like that. Basically, be a good kid. Don't be a little shit. It was just a lot of fun, memorable characters. There were a few scenes in here, like descriptions of people in terms of the ways that their bodies were described that felt a little cringy to me as an adult. Like I felt like it was a little insensitive or mean maybe. But yeah, overall, we had a lot of fun reading this book, and they want to read the sequel, Charlie and the Great Glass Elevator, I believe it's called. So we will probably be reading it in the future. So the kids gave this 5 stars. They were kind of like, they still think that Matilda is their favorite Roald Dahl book. But this one they also really, really enjoyed and gave 5 stars. I'm gonna give it 4 stars. And yeah, we had fun reading this together. It was a good time. Then I read a book on my Kindle called The Light of the Fireflies by Paul Penn. And I didn't realize that this was actually a translated work until I pulled up the graphic for the cover. I just never realized. It's actually translated from Spanish. I don't have it written down. Oh yeah, the translator was Simon Bruni, I'm sorry. So yeah, this is a translated work. And it is about a little boy who you never know his name. He's just referred to as the boy. And you're kind of dropped in to his situation, right on page 1, where he's living in this basement with his family, his parents, his brother and sister, and his grandmother. And he has always lived in this basement. He was born in this basement, and it's all he knows. And all you kind of know is what he knows. So you're kind of in the dark because he doesn't really know much. So neither do you. But there is all this mystery surrounding, like, why are they living in this basement? How did they get to be here? There's some weird family dynamics going on also in the book that are a little bit disturbing, uncomfortable, and you are just kind of pushing along wanting to know, like, what's going on with this family? Why are they in this basement? And the first half of this book was solid. Like, I was really hooked. I was really intrigued. Like, I was interested because it was just that perfect balance of like giving you information, but not too much where like you wanted to know more. And it was all kind of weird and just weird. But then at about the halfway point, the story goes back in time to the past where you find out why this family is in this basement. And when it got to that point in the book, I was a little underwhelmed by it all. And I was not, I don't know, I just didn't find that part to be as interesting. And then when it got to the actual ending of the book, the ending was frustrating. The ending pissed me off, quite frankly, because it was like, I can't really say exactly why because it would be spoilery, but I just felt like some of the decisions made by this family and these characters were so dumb, and where it was like, if these people would have just done something different, made a different decision, then things would have been completely different. And then there's like the very, very end of the book. What happens there, it just really made me mad. So it kind of affected my overall enjoyment of the book. And it's not something that, like, I think I would read more Paul Penn. I don't even know if any of his other work has been translated, but I would probably read more of his work. But just this one, it's a book, one of those books that is intriguing and well written and everything, but it's frustrating because the characters are very frustrating. So overall, I gave this 3 stars. I enjoyed it, but it wasn't like amazing. And then I finished out the month by listening to another audiobook, and that was Burial Rites by Hannah Kent. And this was narrated, I do not have the narrator written down. I apologize. I will put it down here. But this one is a historical fiction book, but it is based on true events. So the main character in this book, her name is Agnes. I know I'm gonna say this last name wrong. Agnes Magnusdóttir. She was a real person. She was a convicted murderer who in, I believe it was 1830, was the last person to be beheaded, you know, like executed for murder in Iceland. And so this book is basically like about her. So there's a lot of obviously like factual things centering around her and her upbringing and the details of the crime she committed. But then obviously there's a lot of fictional things too, because because Hannah Kent, you know, obviously doesn't know everything, and this isn't a nonfiction book, so she took some liberties. But basically, yeah, it is about Agnes and how before she was beheaded, she had to spend a period of time on this farm with this family while she awaited execution. And you're kind of following her during that period. And you are seeing also in flashbacks, like what her life was like, what her childhood was like, what the crime, the details of the crime and things like that. And this was a really good book in the sense that Agnes was a murderer. You know, she did commit the crimes that she was convicted of, but you kind of get to know her throughout the story. And I don't want to say she's humanized a little bit, but she sort of is. There's more of a nuance there, right? That there's more to this woman than the crime she committed. And by the end, you know, even though you know how it's going to end, because I mean, it's not a spoiler that, you know, she gets executed. You know that the entire book, like, this is gonna happen. It really happened. It's gonna happen. But it's still just sort of like, oh, a little bit sad in the end. It was interesting, and it also painted I think a really like clear picture of what life was like in Iceland in the 1830s, 1820s, you know, early 1800s. The kind of like just the way of life there. It was very well written in that sense, and it was really good. And I really liked the audiobook narration. The narrator had a like British accent. I want to say it was British. I might be wrong, but she had a very like soft and sort of haunting voice. It fit the book perfectly. So yeah, overall this was really good. I would definitely recommend it if you like historical fiction, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. All right guys, so that is what I read in February. Like I said, it was all like 3 to 4 star reads. So nothing horrible, but nothing that like blew my mind or gave me that 5-star feeling. I'm still waiting for it to happen. So let me know down below what you read in February, because I would love to know what everybody's been reading. And that's it. I hope you guys had a great month, and I hope March treats you well, and I will talk with you soon. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.